Off the coast of Washington state, a single sea star is dying, and someone is watching it happen frame by frame. On June 27, 2014, at Guemes Island, a research photographer named Kit Harma points a camera at one ochre star, clinging to a rock the way it has for who knows how many years. The animal looks healthy. A day later, Harma returns. Something is different. A lesion has opened along one arm. The animal's grip seems weaker. A day after that, Harma comes back a third time. What's left barely resembles a sea star at all. Its arms have started to separate from its body. Tissue that once held together is breaking down in real time. 3 photographs, 3 days, one animal dissolving in front of a lens. It's the kind of image that stops you, not because it's gory, but because it's fast. 72 hours to go from intact to unrecognizable. And when marine biologists first saw sequences like this one, they didn't have an explanation. They had a body count. That single photographed sea star deserves your attention, and so does this story. So go ahead and hit subscribe now. To understand why scientists were so alarmed, you have to understand what a sea star actually does for the ocean floor. They're not just tide pool decorations. Sea stars are echinoderms, close relatives of sea urchins and sand dollars. And along the Pacific coast, certain species function as what ecologists call keystone species, a term borrowed from architecture for the single stone at the top of an arch that holds the entire structure together. Remove it, and everything collapses. The ochre star, Pisaster ochraceus, and the sunflower star, Pycnopodia helianthoides, are 2 of the most important keystone predators in these waters. They keep mussel and urchin populations in check, which in turn allows kelp forests and diverse intertidal communities to thrive. When researchers talk about this outbreak, they're not just talking about one animal's suffering. They're talking about the structural integrity of an entire coastline. And by the time anyone understood what was happening, more than 20 species of sea star had already been affected. So when did it start? The earliest documented sign of the current outbreak wasn't in a lab. It was in the field, during a routine survey. In June of 2013, researchers with a long-term coastal monitoring program were conducting surveys near Olympic National Park in Washington state when they began noticing something wrong with the ochre stars. It wasn't the first time sea stars had experienced a die-off. Smaller episodes had occurred in the 1970s, the 80s, and the 90s. But something about this one felt different from the start. It wasn't isolated, it wasn't contained, and it wasn't slowing down. Within months, what had started as a cluster of 6 sea stars in one national park became something far larger. The disease moved south into California and north as far as Alaska, and by 2013 into 2014, it had become the most severe die-off of its kind ever recorded on this coast. The pattern researchers documented was consistent and brutal. First, lethargy. The animal simply stops moving the way it should. Then a deflated look, as though the water inside its body is draining away. Then lesions appear on the skin. Then the tissue itself begins to decay, and the arms start to fragment, sometimes crawling away from the central body entirely before the animal dies. From first symptom to death, the process could take only days. Multiply that across more than 20 species and a coastline stretching thousands of miles, and you have one of the largest marine wildlife die-offs scientists had ever tried to explain in real time. Naturally, the first question everyone asked was simple: what's causing this? And in 2014, an answer arrived, or at least, what looked like one. A team of researchers from Cornell University, UC Santa Cruz, and several other institutions published findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences pointing to a virus. Specifically, a densovirus associated with sea stars, identified through work led by Cornell's Ian Hewson. The virus turned up in symptomatic animals. It turned up in seawater. It turned up in sediment. and even in other species living nearby. For a scientific community desperate for an explanation, it looked like a smoking gun. But the paper stopped short of proving the virus actually caused the disease. Association isn't causation, and the authors knew it. The virus was present where the disease was present, but so were plenty of other things. If this was truly the cause, why did outbreaks keep flaring up in different regions for years afterward, long after the initial wave had supposedly passed? That question wouldn't get answered for a decade. What followed instead was a strange kind of scientific limbo, not resolution, but persistence. Monitoring networks along the coast kept documenting the disease as it kept reappearing, region by region, in what researchers describe as ongoing regional flare-ups rather than a single closed event. An entire archive grew out of the effort, maps charting where outbreaks had been confirmed, photographic symptom guides so field researchers could identify the disease on site, observation logs stretching back years. It was the infrastructure of an unsolved case, built by people who refused to stop looking. For 10 years, the true cause of one of the coast's largest marine die-offs remained, officially, unknown. Then, in August of 2025, at the USC's Marrowstone Marine Field Station in Washington, that changed. An international team of researchers, working across multiple institutions and disciplines, returned to the question with tools the 2014 study never had access to: full genomic datasets, laboratory isolation techniques, and the ability to run controlled disease challenge experiments rather than relying on field associations alone. The effort was led by partners from the Hakai Institute, with involvement from the University of Washington, bringing together marine biologists, geneticists, and pathologists in pursuit of a single answer that had eluded the field for over a decade. What they found wasn't a virus at all. It was a bacterium, Vibrio pectenicida. In sunflower stars, researchers were able to isolate the bacterium in the lab, sequence its genome, and then do something the 2014 study never could: deliberately expose healthy sea stars to it under controlled conditions and watch the disease develop. The animals got sick, the same lesions, the same tissue decay, the same fragmentation researchers had been documenting in the field for over 10 years. Combined with genomic evidence linking the bacterium to wild outbreaks up and down the coast, the case was closed in a way field observation alone never could have closed it. Not a suspected association, a confirmed cause. The disease that had ended the earlier viral theory as merely correlative now had a name, a mechanism, and laboratory proof behind it. More than a decade after that first cluster of sick ochre stars near Olympic National Park, marine biologists finally had their answer. And it wasn't the one most of them had been chasing since 2014. That's a twist worth sitting with for a second. For 10 years, the scientific consensus pointed toward a virus, and it took an entirely different pathogen to finally close the case. What do you think took researchers so long to find it, and does that change how you see the earlier theory? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. But naming the killer doesn't undo what it's already done. Along huge stretches of the Pacific coast, populations of ochre stars and sunflower stars remain a fraction of what they once were. And because these are keystone species, their absence ripples outward, into mussel beds left unchecked, into urchin populations that can explode without predators to control them, into kelp forests that depend on that balance to survive. Researchers are careful not to call this a closed case. Regional flare-ups are still being recorded. The broader map of where this disease has struck and how its patterns shift year to year is still being filled in. What began as a mystery about dying sea stars is now, more accurately, a still unfolding story about an ecosystem trying to find a new equilibrium after losing the architects that built it. Knowing the name of a pathogen is not the same as reversing what it's done. Vibrio pectenicida has a name now, a genome, a documented mechanism. What it doesn't have is an undo button. Somewhere along that same Washington coastline, in the same tide pools where a photographer once tracked one dying sea star across 3 unbearable days, the tide pools are still rewriting themselves, species by species, reef by reef, and no one yet knows what they'll look like when they're done.